The series begins with a 17-year-old teenager named James, who is aware of his mental disturbance. He realized he lacked a sense of humor since he was 8 years old and never smiled. Even when his father, Phil, told jokes, James didn't laugh and wanted to hit his father in the face. When James was 8, his father bought a deep fryer he saw on TV. One day, James put his hand in the boiling oil to feel something, as he was devoid of emotions. At 15, he stole a neighbor's cat, put it in a box, took it to the woods, and killed it. He then killed many other animals and remembered each one. One day, James was in the school cafeteria, watching the students to choose one to kill, as he was bored with killing animals. Suddenly, a strange girl named Alyssa approached him, saying she saw him skateboarding and that he was terrible at it. Alyssa reflects on her memories, saying she likes to lie on the grass and look at the sky because it makes her tired of what's happening around her. When she does this, her mind stops thinking for a second, bringing her happiness. Her mother was always nice to her until she divorced Alyssa's father and married Tommy. A week ago, Tommy said something embarrassing about girls to her, and she threw her food at him. Her mother acted like she didn't hear it because she always sided with him. Alyssa's mother had twins with Tommy, and Alyssa lived in a seemingly perfect house, neighborhood, and family. She hasn't seen her father since she was 8, although he sends her birthday cards every year. She understands why her father couldn't adapt to the situation with her mother and left. Alyssa doesn't trust people who adapt to bad situations. In the present, Alyssa sits in the cafeteria with her female classmates, all on their phones and not talking to each other. One girl texts Alyssa, which annoys her because she is right in front of her. Alyssa throws her phone on the ground, breaking it, and leaves the table. She sees James and realizes he is not ordinary. She approaches him, telling him she saw him skateboarding and that he was bad, though she never actually saw him do it, but said they go to a restaurant, and Alyssa is surprised, asking the waitress if this restaurant is really one of the top 10 in America. The waitress confirms it and asks for their order. Alyssa interrupts James as he orders, asking for a lot of food and cursing while speaking. The waitress becomes upset and warns her that if she curses again, she and James will be thrown out. Alyssa apologizes, orders again, curses again, and leaves the restaurant before the waitress can kick her out. James realizes that Alyssa has some mental issues. On their way, Alyssa says she lives in the most boring city on the planet, and everyone is boring. She sees an old woman walking and comments that she might be the only interesting person in the city, possibly a spy who had 15 illegal abortions and lived her life as she should. When Alyssa asks to go to James's house, he thinks this is his chance to kill her and agrees. At James's house, Alyssa is surprised by the many windows and sees a picture of James's mother who lives in Japan. They sit on the swing in the garden, and James feels uncomfortable as it reminds him of his childhood with his mother. He notices that Alyssa is attracted to rude boys. In the kitchen, Alyssa makes a sandwich, and James watches her, imagining killing her. Phil enters, sits with them, and is happy, thinking his son James is not gay, and that bringing a girl home proves he is normal. Outside, Alyssa tells James his father is stupid. James agrees and sometimes wants to hit Phil in the face. Alyssa decides to visit James again the next day and leaves. The next day, James waits for Alyssa with a knife, intending to kill her. Alyssa is late, in her room in front of the mirror, thinking she ruins everything. She feels safe and comfortable with James, who actually wants to kill her. In a scene, James sharpens the knife and smiles, which is unusual for him. Alyssa's mother brings her clothes for a party. Alyssa initially refuses, but then takes the clothes and goes to the party. She feels bored, eats the guests' food, and is scolded by her mother, who makes her distribute food to the guests. In the kitchen, Tommy gives her a bottle of alcohol and tells her to relax. When Alyssa says Tommy's life is bad, he tells her she can leave the house if she really hates it, and it would be a favor to the family. Tommy puts his hand on Alyssa's waist and leaves. Alyssa's mother sees this, but as usual, pretends not to notice. Alyssa watches her mother with her new family, looking happy, and decides to leave the house, taking Tommy's advice. James has been waiting for Alyssa for hours. She arrives, sits on the couch, and thinks about possibly falling in love with James, who also has a car. James tries to pull a knife from under the couch cushion, contemplating whether to kill Alyssa while she's on her back or stomach. When Alyssa tells him they both hate their homes, families, and town, and suggests they run away together, James agrees, deciding to kill her later without rushing. He leaves the house, hits his father Phil in the face, steals his car, and drives off with Alyssa. On the road, Alyssa feels freedom and happiness, while James thinks about the sound Alyssa will make when he kills her. He plans to kill her in a quiet place. Alyssa realizes James is unsure what he wants to do and tells him they can literally do anything they want. They go to an amusement park where James has no reaction to playing with Alyssa. They then go to a restaurant, and Alyssa is glad she broke her phone because her mother is probably trying to call her. James says his father won't report the car stolen and thinks he'll return home soon. soon. Alyssa talks about her love for food and how she always ate when living with her mother. When it's time to pay the bill, Alyssa asks James if he has money since she spent all hers at the amusement park and also paid for James. James has no money and leaves the restaurant alone, returning to the car. Alyssa, worried, follows him without anyone paying the bill, and they drive off. James is rude to Alyssa, which makes her more attracted to him. Alyssa suggests they have a relationship in the car. James, eager to kill her, decides to go along with what she wants to smoothly carry out the killing. Alyssa takes off his t-shirt while he's driving, causing an accident where the car hits a tree. Alyssa laughs, and James says the car is the most expensive thing his father bought. Alyssa stops her hysterical laughter, and they both get out of the car, fearing it might explode. After moving a few steps away, the car indeed explodes. They think about returning home, but don't say anything, trying to appear rebellious to each other. James is thankful he didn't kill Alyssa in the car, as the police would have found her body when they arrived. The two walk together through the forest, with James shirtless due to the earlier incident. They reach the road, but no car wants to stop for them, likely because James looks suspicious without a shirt. Eventually, a car that looks like a kidnapper's vehicle stops. Alyssa is scared but feels compelled to get in and worries about the trouble she'd be in if she got killed. The driver tells Alyssa she can find a sweater in the trunk for her boyfriend James. Alyssa corrects him, saying James is not her boyfriend, which begins to irritate James. The man laughs, saying he likes Alyssa's personality and keeps glancing at her in the mirror. James sees a picture of a small dog on the car's tablet, and the man tells him it's a valuable breed that looks cute but will become fierce and terrifying as it grows. The man, claiming to have been in the army and trustworthy, asks what they were doing alone in the forest, but they don't tell him anything. When he offers James his phone to call his mother, James lies, saying his mother died long ago, which surprises Alyssa. They arrive at a restaurant, and Alyssa is upset because James had said his mother was in Japan when she's actually dead. She expresses discomfort with the man, suspecting he killed people in the army and will buy a fierce dog to use in dog fights. The man brings them food, and Alyssa sees a picture of his family in his wallet and mocks his children. When no one laughs, she calls them boring, curses, and leaves alone. James apologizes to the man for Alyssa's behavior and asks about his army experience and if he killed people. The man admits it was part of his job and had no choice, unlike James, who knows the exact number of animals he's killed. James goes to the restroom, and the man follows him. Alyssa, sitting outside, knows she's wrong, but admits she doesn't know how to apologize. When she enters the restaurant, she can't find James, who is in the restroom being harassed by the man. Alyssa walks in on them and is shocked. The harasser tries to leave, but Alyssa stops him and demands his wallet, threatening to tell his family he harasses teenagers in restrooms and to report him to the police. After considering, the man gives her his wallet and leaves. Outside, sitting in shock, Alyssa asks James why he didn't defend himself from the harasser. His lack of response is due to his psychological disorder. When Alyssa asks if something happened to him as a child, James thinks for a while, looks at her, but lies and says no. The two head to a hotel and ask for a room for two. The receptionist, wary of Alyssa, reluctantly gives them the room key, seeing them as just teenagers. Alyssa enters the bathroom, upset about what happened to James, but not wanting to show it. James takes out a knife from his sock and prepares to kill Alyssa when she comes out, standing by the bathroom door. However, he hears Alyssa crying inside, which affects him, and he puts away the knife. Alyssa lies to him, saying she's going to buy something, and uses the hotel phone to call her home. When Tommy answers and asks who is calling, Alyssa remains silent, so Tommy realizes it's her and asks what she wants. Alyssa asks to speak to her mother, but Tommy refuses, saying her mother doesn't want to talk to her. Alyssa is upset, ends the call, looks at a birthday card from her father, and sadly thinks about him. She returns to the room and tells James she can't ever go back home, unlike him. However, James doesn't really want to return either. Alyssa asks if he really wants her to stay with him or if he's the type to get attached and then disappear. James says he wants her. Alyssa decides to live with her father and suggests James could come if he wants, and he agrees. Alyssa sleeps in the bed and asks James to hug her to feel safe until she falls asleep. Phil calls the police to report his son, and it's revealed that James is still contemplating killing Alyssa. James wakes up thinking about his mother and his childhood with her. Alyssa looks at him, contemplating her secret, feeling sometimes she could truly love James, but other times he acts like a stranger and is unstable. They leave the room, and Alyssa pays the receptionist, leaving a tip. She has a lot of money because she took the harasser's wallet. The receptionist notices the money and asks where it came from. Alyssa looks at her and jokingly says they robbed a bank, then leaves with James. They walk on foot as they don't have a car. Alyssa wonders if her father might not want to see her and might not recognize her when he does. She decides not to go to the train station, fearing they might be reported for robbing the harasser. It turns out Alyssa's father lives far from where they are, so they need a place to stay for a few days until until things calm down and they can go to the station. The two arrive at a luxurious house with a big swimming pool, which Alyssa finds appealing. She checks if anyone is inside, finding the place dusty and assuming it's empty. Alyssa breaks a window to enter the house with James. Inside, they find books and a photo of the house's owner, who appears to be a professor. Alyssa discovers a liquor cabinet, drinks from it, and gives a bottle to James, who drinks alcohol for the first time. They go up to the bedroom, and Alyssa decides they should stay there for a while to plan their next steps, taking their time. When James asks if she's hungry, she replies she's always hungry. James cooks, and they eat by the pool. Alyssa thanks him for his cooking and asks where he learned to cook. James reveals he taught himself because his father always brought home ready-made, sugary foods, and if James hadn't learned to cook, he would have ended up with diabetes. Alyssa decides to wash the dishes, but ends up throwing them into the pool. They go inside, and Alyssa plays music and dances while James drinks alcohol. Alyssa reflects that some people feel embarrassed when they dance, unlike her, who feels it's the time she can act most naturally. She feels embarrassed when talking to people, especially when saying something stupid. Alyssa encourages James to dance with her. Although he doesn't like dancing and can't refuse her request, he stands stiffly, drinking, until Alyssa gets him to close his eyes and dance as if she's not there. Watching him dance, she sees him as a beautiful person inside and kisses him. James sees the photo of the house owner and feels uncomfortable. Alyssa gets upset with him for saying he wanted her the previous day and curses at him before storming out of the house. James, who hasn't felt anything or had any emotions since his mother's death, tries again. He goes to the garden, picks flowers, and takes a vase from the storeroom to put them in. The storeroom contains bleach, duct tape, and various disinfectants, which could help him hide evidence if he kills Alyssa. While Alyssa is outside the house, upset, she sees a dead pigeon on the ground. A strange boy approaches her, telling her to stop looking at the pigeon's corpse, and walks with her. He learns she is 17 years old and introduces himself as Topher. As Topher curses while talking, Alyssa, attracted to rude boys, becomes interested in him and finds out he doesn't have a girlfriend. They go back to the house together, where James is waiting for Alyssa. When James sees Topher with her, heading to the bedroom, he begins to feel for the first time because of Alyssa. He doesn't like this feeling because he's starting to truly love Alyssa and sees her with another guy. When Topher goes into the room, he finds that the situation is strange and suspicious, and he thinks that he is on a hidden camera program and that an officer will appear and arrest him on charges of pedophilia because he thinks that Alyssa is lying to him when she told him that she is 17 years old and she looks younger than that. And she tells him, Alyssa, he is making a mistake and his thinking is wrong. James comes back again, thinking about killing Alyssa. He waits for the right moment and takes the soda in his drink. James searches the belongings of the owner of the house, whose name remains Clive, and he meets James, a video recording camera, and a group of pictures of girls who were assaulted and killed. James does not feel anything as usual. He opens the camera and sees the recordings. It turns out that Clive was the one who was raping his victims, killing them, and photographing them while he was doing this. In the room, Alyssa reconsiders when Topher comes close to her and tells him that he is staying away from her. Topher gets annoyed, insults her, and walks away because of her mood swings every now and then. When James sees Topher walking nervously, he goes into Alyssa's room. He knocks on the door, but Alyssa does not open it and tells him to leave from here. James remains sitting in front of the room door while he is working, reading the professor's books while waiting for her until she sleeps. When she sleeps, James enters the room and withdraws and approaches Alyssa. He thinks that when Alyssa closes her eyes, she remains normal, unlike how she is always angry when she is awake. And James sleeps on the floor next to the bed that Alyssa is sleeping on, and he holds her hands while she sleeps. Suddenly, Clive arrives home after returning from a trip. James hears his footsteps and hides under the bed. Clive realizes that his house has been hacked and becomes worried when he sees his house in chaos. He takes an iron skewer with him as a weapon and goes out to the bedroom and opens it. Al-Nawr and Alyssa wakes up terrified, and he asks her how she got into the house. And when Alyssa apologizes, contrary to her habit, Clive calms down and tells her that everything is fine and that she just went through it, and asks her if she is in trouble and needs to stay at his house. He won't stay. There is a problem. And Alyssa lies to him and tells him that she is alone, and James stays under the bed and holds his breath so that Clive does not notice him. And Clive locks the door to the bedroom and tells her that she made a mess in the house, and he sits on the bed next to her and tells her that she also ate his precious food. Alyssa is afraid and keeps wanting to get up, but Clive prevents her, and she tricks him into leaving her while she is crying, but he beats her and rapes her. And suddenly, James comes out from under the bed, takes out his knife, and stabs Clive in the neck, and he prefers Clive. Ali, Alyssa, bleeds and falls on the ground and dies, and the two look at the body in shock, and they both leave the house, light a fire, and burn Elisa's clothes stained with Clive's blood. When James sees her wearing Clive's clothes, he tells her it's not ethical. Elisa looks at him and says that what's truly unethical is killing Clive. 6 hours earlier, they were standing in front of the body, still in shock. James collapses to the ground because of the scene. He thinks about calling the police since what happened could be considered self-defense. Elisa tells him they won't be believed because they broke into Clive's house. Elisa appears calm in front of James, but inside she is screaming with anxiety. She decides they should dispose of the body and makes James help her carry it, but the body is too heavy for them. James says that he read a dead person's body is heavier than when they are alive. They need to clean up all the blood traces and hide any evidence of their presence in the house since they can't get rid of the body. James wears Clive's clothes and Elisa puts on cleaning gloves to avoid fingerprints. She had seen TV shows and movies about people hiding evidence of a crime and thinks to do the same. They play music while cleaning the house, wiping away their fingerprints. James disposes of the knife he killed Clive with in the swimming pool drain. He is next to the body, shocked at seeing a dead person before him, realizing the situation is not like he had imagined when he wanted to kill Elisa. She asks why he killed him, and James says he had to do it because Clive was going to hurt her. James shows Elisa Clive's camera recordings of him torturing and killing his victims. Elisa becomes convinced that Clive was a mentally disturbed criminal who deserved what happened to him. James places pictures of Clive's victims next to the body as evidence of his guilt. He closes Clive's eyes, leaves the house with Elisa, and burns all the evidence. Elisa decides they should go to her father as soon as possible before the police discover the body and they get into trouble. On their way to the train station, James asks her why she didn't burn her jacket. She tells him the jacket is clean, without any blood stains, and she can't dispose of it because it belonged to her father and is the only thing that reminds her of him. When they reach the station, James looks at the train schedule. He decides they should travel later because peak time tickets are much more expensive. Elisa reflects on what happened, blames herself, and thinks she killed someone. She wonders if someone saw them leaving the house and recognizes them. She tells James they must change their appearance so no one recognizes them. They both go to the restrooms. James cuts Elisa's hair and dyes it blonde. She also cuts his hair. They buy new clothes, and Elisa's appearance is very different from before. Unlike James, who still looks the same except that his pants are too tight. Elisa asks him where he got the knife he killed Clive with, but he doesn't respond. In Clive's house, his mother arrives and calls out to him, but there's no response. When she goes upstairs, she discovers her son's dead body and screams, calling the police. The police arrive, including detectives Terry and Younes. Younes acts strangely, bringing coffee for Terry while they stand next to the body. It turns out that Clive's mother knew the truth about her son and burns the photos that were beside the body. Younes goes down to the living room and reads Clive's books after Terry kicked her out of the crime scene for being distracting. A detective comes down the stairs and shows Younes Tofur's wallet found under the bed. The two detectives go to the police station and interrogate Tofur. He insists that the girl told him she was 17 and even showed him her ID. Terry calms him down, saying they're not questioning him about that. She shows him a photo of Clive and tells him that this is the owner of the house where Tofur was with the girl and that Clive was murdered. The detective asks him about the girl's name and he says it's Elisa. At the station, Elisa is hungry, so they go to a restaurant. James notices that Elisa's behavior towards him has changed. He tells her that the knife he has was a gift from his father to help with hunting. Elisa finds it strange that someone would always carry a knife. James realizes that Elisa is now afraid of him and blames himself for not being the protector she needs, but instead frightening her. Back at the station, Tofur describes Elisa, mentioning she wore a brown leather jacket that was too big for her, and remembers she wasn't alone. There was another person named James. In the restaurant, James decides to restore Elisa's sense of security and asks her what happened. Surprised by the question, she tells him that he killed someone yesterday, and every time she closes her eyes, she sees Clive's face as James stabbed him in the neck. When James tries to hold her hand to reassure her, she pulls away, telling him not to touch her, and goes to the restroom. Tofur is released from the station since he wasn't at the house during the crime. Terry decides to announce the descriptions and names of the suspects, Elisa and James, and to search for them as they are either the killers of Clive or witnessed who did. When Elisa enters the restroom, she can't bear the situation she's in. She decides to leave James and never see him again. James waits for her in the restaurant for 4 hours before realizing she has left him. They both go their separate ways, unsure of their next steps. James sits alone, feeling sad, wanting to cry, contrary to his usual demeanor as he reminisces about his childhood and past. He approaches a group of youths and asks them to beat him up, offering them money. They do so, leaving him bleeding. James cries, realizing that he not only protected Eliza, but that she also loved him, and he truly loves her. Eliza sleeps on a bus stop bench. James calls the police from a public phone, saying he wants to report a murder. James recalls an incident from 11 years ago when he was a child living with his mother and father. One day, Phil was worried about his wife's depression. James asked his mother to go feed the ducks in the forest. Initially reluctant, she agreed after persistence from her son and husband. At the lake in the forest, his mother hugged James, telling him she loved him very much. Young and not understanding the situation, James was only focused on feeding the ducks. While doing so, his mother suddenly fastened her seatbelt, drove the car, and plunged herself into the lake, committing suicide by drowning. This traumatic incident deeply affected James as he witnessed his mother's death at a young age. In the present, James is at the police station to report a murder. The officer speaks with him, asking about the murder he wants to report. James changes his mind and instead tells him about his mother's suicide 11 years ago. The officer, realizing James is psychologically disturbed, tries to reason with him, explaining that what happened was not a murder, but a suicide, and there's nothing they can do. At Phil's house, detectives Terry and Yoon arrive to inquire about his son, James. Terry tells Phil that his son stole his car, caused an accident, and then set it on fire. When Yoon asks why he didn't report the stolen car, Phil says he didn't want his son to get into trouble and describes James as a good person inside, despite his odd behavior. Phil lies about the bruise under his eye, caused by James hitting him, claiming it happened during a bar fight. Phil makes tea for the detectives and asks if they found James's girlfriend, learning her name is Elisa. Eliza, sleeping on the street, wakes up thinking that she didn't commit the crime and that James killed Clive. She decides to go to her father alone, but realizes she has little money and James has the rest. Her situation worsens when she realizes it's the start of her menstrual cycle. At Eliza's house, the detectives speak with her mother and Tommy. Tommy keeps answering the questions directed at the mother, annoying Yoons, who asks him to let his wife answer herself. Tommy doesn't mind because, in the end, Elisa isn't his daughter and he feels the situation isn't his problem. The mother learns that her daughter, Elisa, is implicated in a murder. When Terry mentions Eliza's boyfriend, the mother asserts that her daughter doesn't have one and goes to fetch photos of Elisa for the detectives upon their request. At the police station, the officer makes a call and tells James that the only option he has is to seek help from a social services center. He asks James if there is anyone who can take care of him. James recalls his memories with Elisa and how she used to care for him. When the officer goes to fill out James's form, James escapes from the station. The officer doesn't mind as there was no further action that could be taken. Elisa exits a pharmacy after managing to buy medicine for her menstrual cycle. She needs underwear and enters a shop to steal some. As she tries to leave, she is caught by the security guard who saw her stealing something from the shop. James, feeling lonely and searching for Elisa, thinks back to when she was scared of him and didn't want to hold his hand. He spots someone on the street who he thinks is Elisa, but as he gets closer, he realizes it's not her, but someone who looks like her. Elisa, meanwhile, is in the store security room, where the guard searches her for any other stolen items. Elisa yells at him not to touch her, but when he says he'll have to call the police, she surrenders and extends her arms for him to search her. She mistakenly thinks the guard wants to rape her or pay her for a sexual encounter, but he tells her he is married and loves his wife and doesn't want anything from Elisa. The guard says he needs to file a report and contact the police because Elisa is a thief. Then, a message comes over the walkie-talkie about a missing 5-year-old girl, so he tells Elisa to wait in the security room and leaves to find the girl. Elisa thinks the guard is stupid, steals the underwear again, wears it, and escapes. On her way, Elisa finds the missing girl and, despite needing to escape, helps return the child to her father in the store. The guard sees this, and Elisa surrenders again. In the security room with Elisa, the guard brings her coffee and food. After some thought, he decides to forgive Elisa, lets her keep the underwear, and gives her food. Elisa thanks him, and the guard tells her not to steal again. However, on her way out, Elisa steals other clothes from the store and escapes. After getting away from the store, she questions why she did that and throws away the stolen clothes. She worries about James, who saved her while she left him alone, and feels guilty for what is happening. Elisa goes to the same restaurant where she was with James and finds him waiting for her. She smiles and is happy to find him, sitting next to him. James tells her that he lost the money, but Elisa isn't there for the money and apologizes for leaving him alone. She extends her hand to hold James, and when he extends his burned hand, she holds his other, unburned hand. Meanwhile, the detectives discover James's knife in the swimming pool drain at Clive's house. After the murder, all types of crimes became easy for James. He knew how to enter a car and start it by tampering with the ignition wires instead of using keys. He had had learned to steal cars from a young age. Elisa watches him and comments that her father would really like James because of what he's doing. On their way, they play a single CD in the car and dance to one song repeatedly until they get bored of it. Elisa throws the CD away and asks James if he feels guilty about killing Clive. James's intention had been to protect her, and Elisa says that they did the world a favor by killing a rapist and murderer of women, and that the police should honor them for what they did. However, the opposite happens, and their pictures are hung up in the police station, with them suspected of murder and wanted for arrest. James finally feels emotions due to Elisa's presence in his life and knows she won't abandon him. When they run out of gas, James stops at a gas station. There, they encounter a worker named Frodo and his overbearing mother, who is the manager, and causes him psychological discomfort. James plans to keep the car's engine running while Elisa quickly fills up the gas so they can escape without paying, as they have no money. Elisa is proud of James for finally coming out of his shell and thinking like a criminal. When Elisa gets out to fill the gas, the manager tells her she can't fill the car while the engine is running. The manager realizes that James has stolen the car, fills the gas tank herself, and signals her son to call the police. When it's time to pay, Elisa enters the gas station terrified and asks if there are any bathrooms. The manager lies and says no, but Frodo, not understanding what's happening, says there are. The manager threatens Elisa, saying she'll call the police and wants to know from whom they stole the car. The manager restrains Elisa, making her scream and call for help. At the police station, detectives Terry and Younes interrogate James's father, Phil, and show him the knife found at the crime scene. They learn that Phil had given it to James on his 13th birthday. Terry is surprised that anyone would give a knife to their son at such a young age. The police are convinced that the killer used this knife to murder Clive. While Phil is defending his son, James enters the gas station pretending to have a gun in Elisa's jacket. He threatens the manager to stay away from Elisa or he'll shoot her. James restrains the manager and locks her in the storage room. Frodo is happy with what's happening to the manager and turns off the security cameras. Elisa encourages Frodo to take revenge on the manager and destroy the goods in the gas station. Younes, at the police station, wonders why James had to kill Clive, suggesting it might not have been intentional since he had a knife, and recounts her own experience of nearly blinding her sister with a rifle when she was 10. Back at the gas station, Frodo wants to escape with James and Elisa and gives them free food. James goes out to start the car's engine while Elisa tries to buy time and distracts Frodo. At the last moment, she gets into the car and they both escape, leaving Frodo alone, forcing him to flee as well. Elisa enjoys the situation, acknowledging that they have officially become thieves. In Clive's house, his mother was unaware of the recordings on Clive's camera. Younes and Terry visit her and ask a few questions. She reveals that several years ago, there were accusations against Clive from students. She insists these were from a long time ago, and that currently, all accusations against Clive have been dropped. She criticizes the police for investigating Clive's cases instead of looking into the murder itself. The mother then expels the detectives from the house, and Yoon advises her to tell the truth, even if it's against her son, and not to lose her humanity. Elisa feels more like herself with James than when she's alone. They stop at a public phone booth, and Elisa calls her mother. When her mother warns her that the police are after her, Elisa silences her, saying she won't see her again and that she's with her father. Elisa ends the call and returns to the car, and they drive off. At the police station, Clive's mother comes to Younes with Clive's camera, which has the recordings. She decides to confess that Clive was a murderer and a rapist, even though he was her son. Younes shows the recordings to Terry, who is sitting with her friend, and they watch them alone in the car. Elisa finally arrives at her father's house, but when she and James go to meet him, a strange woman opens the door and tells them her father hasn't lived there for a while. Elisa feels disappointed and returns to the car. Although Terry has seen the recordings, she asserts that a murder has been committed, and this is not justified. She says that even if James did it in self-defense, he would still be accused of other crimes. Terry and Younes receive a police report stating that the teenagers were seen at a gas station after committing armed robbery and locking up the manager. Younes and Terry head to the gas station to investigate the incident. James's car breaks down on the road, and he and Elisa walk to the address of her father's new residence, as told by the woman. Elisa is upset with her father for moving out of his house without telling her. They arrive at night at a trailer in a secluded area where Elisa's father is living. Elisa is afraid to meet him, but James encourages her and knocks on the door. Elisa's father opens the door for them. The father's name is Leslie, and he is surprised and hugs his daughter Elisa when he sees her after all these years. Leslie is a drug and alcohol addict, appearing to have been a failure in life and still failing. He makes his underage daughter drink alcohol and realizes that James is her boyfriend. Leslie notices notices that Elisa still keeps his jacket and comments that she was odd as a child, but has grown up to be beautiful. Elisa asks her father if they can stay with him. Leslie lets her use drugs, and Elisa tells him she's in big trouble, but doesn't disclose the murder incident until the right time. The next day, the three of them sit together, and Leslie asks James if he knows how to throw knives. He takes James to a place where they practice throwing knives at wooden targets. Leslie is impressed by James's skill at knife throwing and is relieved to know that James takes care of and looks after Elisa. He asks James if Elisa asks about him and if she loves him. James reassures him, and Leslie is very happy. At the police station, Elisa's mother and Phil watch recordings of their children at the gas station. Elisa's mother blames James, who she believes is holding a gun, for everything that happened and claims her daughter is innocent. Phil insists that his son doesn't have a gun, only a knife. He shows the detectives a family photo and mentions that James's 18th birthday is tomorrow and that his wife committed suicide when James was a child. Phil cries out of sadness for his son. Leslie cooks for his daughter and James, but the food is burnt. He asks them if they want to see his expensive boat in the afternoon. Elisa is surprised her father has such a luxurious possession, raising her esteem of him. When they see the boat, they find it's just junk. A man arrives and tells Leslie he needs him for something important, leaving the teenagers alone. The police learn that Leslie has moved from his residence and assume Elisa will be there. Terry and Yoon explain their plan to an armed forces team to arrest the teenagers. Elisa sees her father dealing drugs to the man who came and realizes Leslie is a drug dealer. She finds this amazing. James is uncomfortable staying with Leslie. Elisa defends her father, thinking he will protect and make them feel safe. She sees her father selling drugs to children and perceives it as normal in her father's view. Terry and Yoon are on their way to Leslie's address. Yoon feels sympathetic towards the teenagers, convinced they were forced to kill Clive in self-defense, but Terry doesn't believe this due to the lack of conclusive evidence. Leslie takes the teenagers to a bar. Elisa is very happy with her father, seeing him as a wonderful person. The detectives arrive at Leslie's old house and ask the current resident, Debbie, for Leslie's new address, but she refuses to disclose it. Yoon gives Debbie her card in case she decides to contact her. At the bar, James considers leaving with Elisa to go somewhere far from Leslie. Elisa tells him he can leave alone if he wants. Leslie dances with his daughter, telling her he missed her a lot, unhappily because Leslie has taken Elisa away from him. Leslie cries, confessing he feels like a failure. Elisa shows him birthday cards he sent her, assuring him he's not a failure. James starts thinking about leaving alone, letting Elisa stay with her happy father. Debbie appears and talks to Leslie alone, revealing that Leslie has a child with her and had kept it a secret from Elisa. When Elisa discovers the truth, she is upset with her father. Debbie demands money from Leslie for their child's expenses, but Leslie leaves the bar alone in his car, attempting to escape. On his way back, Leslie accidentally runs over a dog and continues to flee. The dog suffers while dying, so James decides to end its life as an act of mercy. However, he cries and finds himself unable to kill the dog, despite his past of killing animals, as Elisa's presence has made him more humane. Elisa decides to end the dog's life herself. Debbie, angry with Leslie, sends a message to Yoon with Leslie's address for his arrest. Yoon drives alone at night to the address. Leslie, sitting and watching TV, is shocked when he sees his daughter on the news channels with James, related to the assault on the gas station. Elisa goes to the beach with James and decides to bury her father's jacket and holds James's burned hand without any fear or disgust like the first. And Yoon arrives at the trailer in which Leslie lives and sees Leslie sleeping, and he sleeps. The teenagers on the beach after they decided that they would never come back to Leslie, and Elisa still cannot understand that she has a brother from her father, and she remains worried about having other sisters. And Elisa hates her father more than she hates her mother. James also says that he hates his father more than his mother because she died and his father did not. He tells Leslie about what happened the day his mother committed suicide and that he did not act to save her. He says that his mother was good but was depressed, and Elisa lets him calm down. She tells him that what happened was not his fault, and the two of them do not know whether to stay in the place they are in or to return home. And they decide that they will travel far away together and start a new life. And they think that they are stealing Leslie's boat, but they need the keys. Eunice stays in her car at the trailer, waiting for the teenagers to appear. When she sees them, she hides and refuses to answer Terry when she calls her, because Terry wants to deal with the teenagers with special forces from the army, but Terry still knows who Eunice is. I want to do it. The teenagers enter the trailer, and Elisa looks at her father, feeling disgusted with him. She wakes him up and he lies to her and tells her that he was looking for her, but she does not believe him and tells him that he stepped on a dog and ran away and abandoned her. Alyssa asks him for the keys to the boat and lies and says that she, James, will take them on the boat, and Leslie agrees and says that he will go with them. And when he knows that they do not want him to go with them, he tells them that he knows what they did and that they want to escape on the boat. And he tells them that they are on the news channels everywhere and that Younes is spying, and Alyssa is worried about the keys to the boat. When she tries to steal the keys, her father prevents her and tells them to be quiet and talk to each other. Leslie yells at Alyssa because of her rudeness to him. James defends Alyssa and tells Leslie he doesn't talk to his daughter in this way. And Leslie lies to them and says that he will make tea in the kitchen, but he calls the police to report them and he takes the reward. And he comes back and sits with them and asks his daughter what happened and convinces her that she trusts him and that he didn't talk about the matter, his son, because he felt bad about himself. Alyssa is convinced and trusts her father and tells him that they killed someone who was going to rape her. James notices a gun in the house and takes it when he finds out that Leslie called the police. When Alyssa finds out, she is shocked. She stabs her father in the knee with a knife and Yoon intervenes. It turns out that all of this was that Leslie's call to the police was open and that the police heard James confessing that he killed Clive and that Terry knows Leslie's address and that the special forces are also on their way. In the trailer, Leslie is screaming in pain and Younes tries to calm the situation, warning James that the military is on their way. She decides to help them after confirming that they killed Clive in self-defense, but they must surrender peacefully to the police. This is especially true for James, who has just turned 18 today and won't be tried under juvenile law as he's now legally an adult. Younes tells them that their families are worried about them. However, Leslie warns them not to surrender because Younes is deceiving them. James decides to surrender himself alone as he committed the crime, not Elisa. Elisa hits her father and tells him he shouldn't have children if he plans to abandon them. Elisa is shocked to learn that the birthday cards she thought were from her father were actually sent by her mother. When Elisa realizes she won't be imprisoned in the same cell as her boyfriend James, she hits Younes on the head, knocking her unconscious, takes the keys, and runs to the beach with James. However, the boat isn't there, and Terry and the military forces arrive at the trailer to find Younes and Leslie unconscious. James tells Elisa to tell the police that he kidnapped her and committed all the crimes alone. When he sees that Elisa doesn't want to do this and leave him, he apologizes for what he's about to do, hits her, and runs towards the beach, not knowing where he's heading. The military forces reach the beach, and Elisa screams for them to let her go after being apprehended. James gets shot when one of the soldiers fires at him.